Welcome to Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, promoting prosperity and harmony to help you flourish in all areas of life. Join in as we explore the motivations and goals of real estate investors and how their ability to invest abundantly has provided them with the time and freedom to contribute to the world in a creative and thoughtful way. Now please welcome your host, Dr. Allen.
I'm your host, Dr. Allen. Today's guest has almost 3 decades of real estate investment experience as a licensed real estate broker and investor. He purchased his first rental property in 1994 and his first apartment complex in 2005. Since then, he has steadily increased his real estate investment holdings by rolling profits and equity forward and by partnering with co-investors. In 2018, he left the W-2 world to devote full-time attention to his investment company. In addition to managing his own investments, he is a professional mentor and coach for aspiring real estate investors and private money lenders. I am pleased to welcome to the show today, Scott Price.
Thank you.
Impressive background. So let's find out how it all came together. Robert Frost penned these famous words, and everybody has heard them, I'm sure, but I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Talk to us, Scott, about a major fork in your road that has made the difference in your life.
Sure. I'd say there were several, but they all are along the same theme of essentially being financially independent or working on a plan toward being that, and being a bit of, as much as I can, master of my own destiny. And what I mean by that is not just being a W-2 worker in a company, which I've certainly been for a very long time. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, that wasn't the larger goal. And as far as a fork in the road, thinking back, it likely goes, believe it or not, all the way back to when I was 12. Mm-hmm. And when I was 12 years old, before I was 12, I would work with my father in the garage. He would, on the side, to bring in money for the family so we could do vacations and things like that, he would buy old cars, fix them up, and resell them for a profit. And when I was 12, we were looking at this one car, and I had been working on lawn mowing and saving up my money. And I asked my father if I could buy a particular car that he was looking at to purchase. And he not only gave me the go-ahead to do that, but he fully supported it. And the reason I look at that as a fork in the road is this was a long time ago. This was, I think, 79. And I bought this. It was a really cool car. It was an old Alfa Romeo convertible, but it was an old one. And I bought it for $550. And I put $50 into it, which is mostly wax and cleaning supplies. And I sold it for $1,600. And to make $1,000 as a 12-year-old back then, it was a big eye-opener in terms of there are other ways to look at the world, and there are other ways to really approach business other than just hourly. And I just kept it for 3 weeks, turned it around, and I actually rolled that money forward. As a 12-year-old, I invested in some stocks, and I continued working in my lawn mowing business. And the reason it was a bit of a fork is it really put me on that classic path of how can I be, again, master of my own destiny instead of dependent on the W-2 job until I'm 65 and retire with some benefits kind of thing. So it actually goes back to there. There are other things along that path, certainly, but that was a really important one. And it was an opportunity that my father gave me that he actually may not even to this day realize how important that was.
Yeah, that is quite a fork in the road, and what a precocious 12-year-old you certainly were to have undertaken that project in the first place. And I'm really impressed with the fact that you were able to take those capital earnings, because that's really what it was an increase in your capital, and to actually roll those forward. That's really something for a 12-year-old. You must have had some kind of supportive environment to have cultivated that kind of mindset at that age. There are precocious kids who just do that on their own, but not very many. So talk to us about your environment there.
Yeah, I'd say it was a combination, and it was a combination of living in an environment that would support my interests. I did have a lot of interests, and the funny thing was when I was 12, believe it or not, I read books on wine tasting, even though I'd never tasted wine, and stock investing and stuff and Japanese gardens and all this kind of stuff. It was just, there's so much really neat, interesting things out there in the world. And as a 12-year-old, I started being a sponge for the things that were coming in and were possibilities and just to learn about. So that was certainly a part of it, was me creating an environment where I looked into things. And then, like I mentioned, I certainly, in that case, my father was very supportive of me moving forward on that project and other projects as long as I took responsibility for it, and as long as I understood that I might not make money, and if I don't, that's my problem to deal with. But if I do make money, then I get to enjoy it, or that kind of thing. And that's been somewhat pivotal, or a good North Star, so to speak, even in the way that I teach my own daughter, who's almost that same age now. She's 11. So yeah, I certainly am moving that concept forward of, if she really wants to do something, she's welcome to do it, but she has to take responsibility. She has to take the lead, and she has to understand both sides of responsibility. There's upside as well as downside. And so it's a virtuous cycle there, at least in terms of the family, moving that idea forward.
Not only is that a North Star for your daughter, but I'm sure it was a North Star for you as well. As you already mentioned, it really was a real formative experience. But oftentimes in our life, we find this North Star, and then for whatever reason, we lose our way, and that North Star becomes dim. Did that ever happen to you, or have you had pretty much that North Star guiding you really throughout your life since that time?
It really, I would say the only time it dimmed, it never left. I would say the only time it dimmed was when I actually went to college, which was all a good thing, good experience. I'm very glad I did it. And then started my first job. I got on the, I would say, normal treadmill of, okay, I'm working a job. How can I work to get promoted and get slightly higher pay and continue on this? And what's my retirement plan and things like that. So that was a bit of a distraction, I would say. I still had on the side, like for instance, I mentioned or excuse me, you had mentioned that I bought had my first rental back in '94. So I was still thinking along those lines, but it was really a side thing. And it wasn't until 2005 that I really started getting serious about real estate investing, and which was really centered around, again, being financially independent and master my own destiny. There's a lot of great stuff about going to college, but it's a system. And a lot of people, there are a lot of influences there on doing well is defined by your job and your position and your income. And I didn't, even if I at first didn't even necessarily improve my actual income, my freedom toward being more self-directed and self-controlled, that had a lot of value as well. And then eventually I was able to actually surpass my W-2 income as well through other means, through other investments. But at first it was just being on that treadmill. So that I did need to be reminded of it. I was reminding myself, and I kept on my path, and I kept that North Star, but there was a lull there where I had to work through that. I wish in retrospect that I had not actually been so focused on career and had been more focused on building my own business. That's a hindsight being 2020 thing, but I now wish I had started earlier, what I ended up doing later.
Not to denigrate higher education or the corporate world. Both can be quite seductive. And because there's a lot of rewards for following that path, or seeming rewards for following that path, I think a lot of us have been seduced. Higher education has been my adult experience, and it's been extraordinarily rewarding in many ways. It wasn't that beneficial on the financial path, and of course I knew that from the beginning, but to succeed in this world of academia, it takes a lot of focus and attention that is not always focused on financial things. You found your way back. You never really lost it, but you did find your way out of what you called the treadmill world of the W-2 process. And that has been ongoing since 1994. Then in 2005, you got serious about that process. Enlightened investors, are you passionate about the work of your calling but have little time to develop a passive investment portfolio to secure your future? Even though you're blessed to work in your calling, would you like to have the financial freedom to live more abundantly in all areas of life? If this is you, visit us at steedtalker.com. You can schedule a 30-minute call to talk about anything or send me an email at alan@steedtalker.com. I look forward to meeting and connecting with you. How are you different today, Scott, as a person, both emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually? And I'm asking because this show is a show of inspiration. I have never talked to anybody yet who actually went into it because, oh, I just love real estate, or because, oh, I just have to make all kinds of money, even though many of them have said, yeah, I went into this for money. But as they have increased their wealth, they've all gone, there's so much more to life and to this. And the real reasons I did this really had little to do with money and a whole lot to do with the personal lifestyle. So how are you different now? How have you as a person changed?
Sure. A number of ways, of course, and a number of life experiences along the way. I would say there are a couple areas that have become significantly different over time. One of them is a focus, I would say, on, if you want to call it legacy, not that I'm looking at it as what I need for somebody to remember me in many years or something like that directly, but some of the best advice that I ever received was essentially taking what some people call the deathbed perspective and looking back on life as if you're on a deathbed and thinking, what do you wish you had done? What do you wish you had done more of? What do you wish you had done less of? And I think it's an incredible mental exercise to do, and to really try to put yourself in that position. And it really, at least for me, helps focus things. And what I've done is, over the past 10 to 20 years, to answer your question, is I've become much more focused on a combination of long-term goals and short-term, almost daily prioritization toward those long-term goals. And by goals, I don't necessarily mean things that are things such as, I'm going to own object X, or I'm going to achieve income Y, or something like that. It can be just daily practices around family, health, loving relationships, things like that. And there also are specific goals that are oriented to, yes, I've achieved them kind of thing. And then there are others that I would just say are ongoing. The key is to continue doing them every day. And I've increasingly put emphasis on that. About 15 years ago, which coincides with when I bought my first apartment complex, I really started, and it was probably a little before that, maybe 16 or 17 years ago now, my wife and I actually put together a vision board. And it basically had, it was a pictorial one. There are different ways to do it. Ours used pictures. And for many years, we had that up in our office. And it was very defining for us. And it really helped guide us. And that kind of focus, eventually I took to a daily perspective, which is again of how I've changed along the way. I now, on a near daily basis, and my ideal was actually daily, but sometimes I'm too busy or something, but almost every day, I actually have right here beside me on my desk a sheet of paper, and I have goals on there, and they're life goals, and what I'm going to do today in the morning or the evening before. I actually write what I'm going to do today that helps me in that long-term goal, that overarching goal. The overarching goal may not happen today, might not be done today, but what am I going to do today to move myself closer to that? And that's been a big change. I certainly was, I would say, more at the whims of others and more at the whims of society, what I was saying about jobs and things like that, but more at the whims of societal norms. And now I'm more, I would say, directed toward what I want out of life and what I want to provide in life and what I want to do with others. So it's probably one of my most significant transformations over time. And it allows me to live, I would say, an intentional life and a happier life where I feel happier with what I've done and what I'm doing.
If it's not too intrusive and too personal, could you give us a specific example of one of those short-term goals that ties into the long-term goal?
Sure. So have a number of them. So as an example, we wanted to move to Whidbey Island, which is where we live. And to do that, I had to make it a holistic process. And what I mean by that is both my wife and I worked generally with technology companies, and there basically are none on this island. And I had to think, okay, I want to move there. I want to build my own home. So I have moved there. I have built my own home there. And how do I do that? And that's where actually real estate investing came in as one element of it. It gives me the location flexibility because I personally have a portfolio that most of my properties I don't manage directly. I hire property managers and I work with the property manager. So I don't need to live next door and be there to swing a hammer or unclog a toilet. And as an example, regarding your question, I had to back up and say, okay, how do I create that scenario to achieve that goal? And so real estate income, building it while I was working at W-2 income, but growing my portfolio to the point where I could actually have that as my primary source of income and then be location independent. So right now, both my wife and I, we work out of our home office, and our home office could just about be anywhere in the world at this point because of the way we've structured everything.
So back up to when you were putting all of this together, what would be one of those short-term daily goals that tied into the bigger picture?
Oh, sure. Yeah. As far as, for instance, so let's say building the real estate, let's take that. There's a number of different goals, but if we're talking about building the real estate business, it might be something around brokers that I need to contact, or I need to reach out to specific sellers. There are 2 properties that have come across my desk and I need to do some due diligence on them. There's, I would say, operational things. They are targeted toward, okay, how can I increase my portfolio to increase my income and net worth to achieve my other bigger goals, which are not related to income and not related to net worth. But I do enjoy real estate. You were mentioning earlier about, and I know it's true, some people like it, some people don't, but they still get into it because of the benefits of it. I do enjoy it, which is nice. But the flip side is, the reality is that, if I won the Powerball lottery and suddenly got some huge windfall out of the sky, I wouldn't probably feel the need to do more. But at the same time, I do have a lot of things that I want to do, and a number of those things do require some funds. So even though we can cover our living expenses and have some left over, I actually want to continue growing because I want to do other things that aren't just around me. And an example of that is right now I'm actually creating a public sculpture park. Personally, I've bought the land, I'm creating all the infrastructure, I'm doing that. And that all takes money and time. And if it wasn't for me working in real estate and having flexibility on time, as well as having some extra funds to do it, that wouldn't happen. And after I get done that, I'd frankly like to do another big project like that.
I have one last question. Before we get into that, tell the folks how to get in touch with you. You do have an impressive website, and they can go to that, bonville.com, and that's probably the primary way to get in touch with you, but are there other ways?
Sure. Yeah, there's a contact form. I believe it also has my phone number. And probably the easiest would be email, which is just Scott@Bonvolo. That's BON as in November, V as in Victor, OLO.com. So Scott@Bonvolo.com.
Okay, well, Scott, my last question has to do with something you've already touched upon, and that is legacy and leaving this world. So how would you like your epitaph, your obituary, or just simply how would you like to leave this world, and what do you want to leave as your legacy?
Yeah, I would say that for myself, I'd say there's two aspects to legacy. There's one that's essentially myself reflecting on life, and then there's the other, which is just like inside in, and then there's also outside in, or outside meaning how other people would look at me. And for myself, as far as legacy, I would want to feel that I lived with intention, and that I lived with the spirit and the goals and the positive momentum to do cool things in life, and to do things that I look back on and have a smile on my face, and the people I interacted with and the projects I did and things like that, and to feel good about it, to feel a life well lived. That's the inside in legacy. And then from the outside perspective, meaning other people, I would hope that, for instance, for my daughter and people that I interact with and family and friends and things like that, that what I just said is looked at as something that is hopefully a good model of sorts. And not that I'm somebody to put up on a pedestal or something, but at least something to consider in terms of intention and going toward goals and doing it. And really doing it. And it doesn't have to be my goals by any means, or my life vision or anything like that. That's not the point. The point is living life with that deathbed perspective, looking back and having said that you did the things you wanted to do, and you did as little as possible of the things that you wish you had not done, and striking that balance and being happy with it. And hopefully being somewhat of an example of that, where other people can say, yeah, that's a good thing. I should do that too. And if they're not already.
Our guest today, Scott Price with Bonvolo Real Estate, bonvolo.com. Scott, it has been a real pleasure, and have enjoyed getting to know the real person behind the success story. Thanks for being on the show, Scott.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for joining us on Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. For more information, as well as access to our free ebook on enhancing your well-being through real estate investing, be sure to connect with us at steedtalker.com. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine and enhance the humane treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. Connect with us at steedtalker.com.